positions in meta that we have the multiplayer. But we are getting ready onto the secondary map. I'm pretty stoked because I accidentally cheated, and
You
that's
always do this.
I'm the worst person in the entire world.
That wasn't me writing it down at all.
It's it's Tomb.
Yeah.
I'm excited. That show I like the Tomb over the BOE, and the reasoning for the Tomb over the BOE is just because Tomb, the smaller map, it's been like a recent thing for them, but they're like the only team in NA who seems to like Tomb of the Spider Queen, other than even in Death, but they're more of like, we like small maps, you know? So I feel like it's nice that Roll20 is able to pick up something that is a little bit only theirs, much like the warhead of Tempo, if you will.
Yeah, Tomb was something that they would be willing to pick before, but it really seemed to be like, oh, we might like this even more than Infernal Shrines or Battlefield of Eternity when we defeated MVP Black on it.
Yeah.
When we shut MVP Black out on it at the mid-season brawl. That seemed to be when it was like, maybe we're a Tomb team now.
Yeah. Anytime you beat MVP Black, you are now whatever that composition, whatever that map team is. But yeah, again, Roll20 selecting to go to the Tomb of the Spider Queen. There's still a lot of things remaining in the map pool that I would give the slight edge over to Tempo Storm, so we'll see how that plays out as the series goes in. But again, a map like this, it's no team in North America seems to be prioritizing it as high as them, so I feel like that gives them a rather large advantage.
Tomb of the Spider Queen yesterday between Roll20 and Team Freedom was the first battleground. It again, I believe, was Roll20's choice, and it worked out well for Roll20. They started the first turn-in, they got the second one, they took out all of the forts, and then had a healthy lead over Team Freedom. Team Freedom did start to get a couple of team fights back here and there, but largely because Roll20 were able to draft their Medivh, Team Freedom couldn't get a lot of kills necessary for them to buy the time needed to start snowballing things back into their favor and make the miracle comeback, as Kira was calling it to me. So Roll20 got the victory there. They should, again, feel really confident going into Tomb of the Spider Queen, not only because they just won the last game, but because it is a favorite of theirs.
Yeah, Tempo's got to be scared, and hopefully they flex a bit draft priority to be able to adjust to the map here over Roll20, just because Tempo, again, looking at the draft up to the last game, it wasn't that wild in terms of the picks itself, but adjustments and, you know, even seeing June on the Malfurion didn't look too hot up into the last game. There didn't see too many fights where you're like, you know, now I can see the argument of moving into the Malfurion. I feel like a lot of the idea behind it was that they were going to go with like the follow-up to the Impale, but they also went Burrow Charge build, and if you recall most of the initiations Tempo wanted in the last game, they didn't open with Impale. They always opened with Burrow Charge. Not the easiest thing to get the immediate follow-up onto. So I just feel like, you know, it was a little bit, the thought process mixed with how it was played was kind of counterintuitive.
It's very likely that Tempo Storm picks Malfurion again, unless Roll20 wants to get it for Buds, but Bud seems to be sort of shifting away, at least somewhat. Tempo Storm tends to ban Uther on Tomb and then pick up Malfurion fairly early on, pairing with something like a Stitches, Kael'thas, so that they have a lot of wave clear, as well as the crowd control chain, so that they can get picks early on.
Tempo looking if they want to ban themselves the Tassadar. If they do ban out the TAS, I feel like that indicates just that they want something specifically into their hands when it comes to this draft. At first glance, when looking towards some of the smaller maps, what does Tempo prioritize? I mean, specifically for the map, not just generic, objectively strong things. We see things like Kael'thas slightly higher than some of the other because they have the opportunity to move into the Stitches. Uther banned away out of the side of Roll20. So what do we see as the first pick for Tempo Storm here? Is it still the Genji? It is.
They'll pick up Genji. Yeah, in the past, they first picked Malfurion, they first picked Anubarak, and then in banning tasks, the last game versus Superstars, they picked Uther. Roll20, quick to respond, getting Greymane. We know that this is an important hero for them to be able to get because it can be either Goku, as we found out yesterday, it could be Glaurung, or it could be Prismaticism playing that, so it doesn't lock them into anything. And they'll also get Stitches.
Yeah, I like the fact that we see the synergy, too, between those two picks. A lot of the times that we do see the Stitches here in North America, we're often looking for the immediate follow-up, or at least the damage to get that immediate threat. When somebody gets hooked in, not going like, you know, oh, he's out of position, we can possibly be able to save him. Just be like, that is going to be one dead member. In Roll20, by having that Cursed Bullet, we'll have the opportunity to chunk a large amount of whatever target gets pulled in there by Justing. For Tempo, though, 25 seconds remaining. with the Genji pickup, they are obviously struggling a smidge into the wave clear department. One of the premier warriors has been taken away with the Stitches. So I would assume support pickup and their primary warrior just to make sure that they don't find themselves isolated. Like that Uther, a new Barak, something like that. Obviously Uther gone, so maybe more of the Malfurion.
And with, they got to Haka instead, but I was wondering if they were going to want to get a new Barak there, as we saw yesterday.
Yeah.
Very effective if Roll20 moves into Gorge again, to be able to have Cocoon to stop him from being able to, you know, kidnap one of your teammates is pretty nice. That's what Zugrug was using with his Anu Barak, but in this case, they want to make sure that they can get their Dahaka again for Fury.
Yeah, now that's really interesting. You know, tempo. Are they afraid of the Medivh enough to be able to try and get that ban out? Because again, you talked about the flexibility of the Greymane, what that does enable. Because if that Greymane isn't picked up, suddenly that flexing into the Medivh is no longer available. That is a problem whenever you have only very singular overlaps into the hero pools. But it's really nice that Greymane was adjusted and picked up that high for Roll20.
And it's great that they banned a Numerak too.
Yeah, it's a very tough ban phase here for Tempo Storm. But it looks like they have already decided. They're going with the Medivh.
No Medivh for Glaurung, but again, he could be the Greymane player. And there's still some other options here. What else have we seen Roll20 pick on Tomb? We've seen a little bit of Kael'thas before, and also Prismaticism playing Pyroblast versus a Genji. You think maybe that's going to be a follow-up now for Stitches?
I mean, it very much could be. That is, I mean, it wouldn't be unrealistic. It provides a really good backliner with hard CC. That's something that's very rare in the current meta, a map like Tomb of the Spider Queen. I mean, that is really where this strategy kind of came to light for Team Dignitas, was on Tomb. So I'm not going to put it out of the realm, but I don't feel totally comfortable promoting that this is exactly where Roll20 would. It very much is a kind of whatever direction they would like to move. And there it is. You're right. Prismat busting out the Kael'thas.
And Buds is Rhaegar again, making sure they can get their support. Kael'thas makes a lot of sense too, especially since Malfurion was taken away from them, so that they are guaranteed still to have something that can follow up, a hard crowd control, the stun of Gravity Lap to follow up after Hook. Last two picks for Tempo Storm. Still need Warrior. Arthas is up as one possibility. Thinking about Caterpillar, I immediately think Anub, because it's been so much Anub, and then Stitches too, but
Tyrael was a thing that Tempo was running in phase 2 above all else, and Cattle was like half playing it / half Fury too. I mean, I'm more suggesting that as like, that's one of the few teams that was showing that for 1 week in, so like, that is something that maybe they could do if they wanted to. As
more support for Genji especially, because Malfurion heals are not like an Ancestral Healing or even a Divine Shield to give those 3 seconds of invulnerability for Genji, but instead Johanna.
So going with a wave clear oriented warrior, but not too much when it comes to the clear. It's very forgiving onto a Kael'thas and Stitches composition because you always have the Iron Skin to be able to wear that damage. And even if you pull her in and you fail to get the immediate follow-up, she drops the Iron Skin and then Gravity Lapses away. So it suddenly increases an already very teamwork-oriented composition that Roll20 has drafted and just exaggerates some of the flaws of it that much more.
Final pick for Goku, and he'll be playing the Aspect of Death. Man, I was already a Goku fan, but I'm even more so because that is my favorite Malthael skin.
Yeah, I was thinking that last slot had to either be the Leoric once again coming out from Goku or the Malthael, so I like the Malthael pick, that as long as there's somebody, again, to be able to secure those kills from long range, and we have a Kael'thas, probably one of the better heroes in the entire game to be able to do that, not skill shot dependent in terms of the projectiles can be blocked.
Is this the last rites Cursed Bullet Dream?
Like, I respect where you're going with that.
And you love it, and you think that yes is the answer to that. Continue. Is that what it was?
You're not wrong, actually.
I don't know. I heard so many pros talk about that at the beginning, but I don't.
No, I don't think we'll see it because we haven't seen it flex. But like, let's just say in a world where it's like, what kind of world would you ever be able to draft that and me be like, oh, that wouldn't be like, why not? Li Ming, Johanna, like they have a very weak front line, very susceptible. The only thing you do is just avoid Genji and avoid Dahaka. They aren't unkillable. You could focus them if you wanted to, but they both have like the, oh, this person might not die variable. Every other person you could rely on dying because Malph's not going to save them. It's just not going to happen. I'm ready for it. Pyroblast
yes!
on top of it. Let's get a little weirder.
Yeah!
No, I mean, I do expect it to still be traditional, the Tormented Souls, and then, again, the long range on the kill thoughts to be able to make sure they have any kind of burst and lockdown and get that final kill and not just be like, oh, poison going everywhere and nothing's happening. I feel like Roll20's got to feel good, not only considering the game one, the draft that they have comfortable, and it's one of their favorite maps. It's a tough game for Tempo.
And that would mean Tempo Storm would be down 2 games. They really want to tie things up here. Let's see if they can do it on Tomb of the Spider Queen.
I just never, I froze there for a moment because I just didn't, like, it's very rare that somebody comes up with the wild idea and throws it my way, and then I'm just like, you know, I've never even thought about that even once in my entire...
How did you not hear about that when he was first released? That's what everyone was talking about.
I know, but I feel like that's what everybody was talking about because they, like, it's one of those variables where it's like the Zeratul, but in the opposite direction, right? You see it and you, like, that has to be busted, but then when you look at the practicality of it being a thing, you're like, this is about as good as, like, Gazlo, right? You're like, oh, man, he has one of the coolest heroics in the entire game. Look at Gravel Bomb. It pulls them all in. Like, it's like you can CC afterwards, but then you're like, oh, wait, nobody's ever going to group, period. And outside of that, I'm not as high impact as maybe I'd like. Now, all the Gazlo 1 tricks in the world, I'm going to send angry tweets my way. I'm sorry, but it's just the way it is. He is underrated. I'll give you guys that much. He is underrated.
That is not the first time I've heard Dread say that Gazlo is underrated.
He's just not busted. Either way, Roll20 starting out with the Wave Clear Dream Prismat, flexing out why, you know, Kael'thas is known for some of those smaller maps, empowering your Q, and 1 Chain Bomb is about all you need, and that wave is just gonzo.
Meanwhile, it's Malthael versus Dahaka bottom. It's a nice 1v1 for Malthael, but Genji's looking to make it a 2v1, showing up. Goku dodges the tongue and will stay safe. But the 1v1 is very nice for Malthael. Not only does Dahaka have that higher health pool because he is a warrior that you can do a lot with your Reaper's Mark, but once you get Touch of Death at 7, you can reduce his self-healing, which is a thorn in the side of our dinosaur friend.
It seems like for a dude who's like known for adapting and surviving through adjusting, that a thorn is not enough to be able to take him down, but you'd be surprised, man. Have you ever like just grab, you know, when you see the beautiful flower and you're gonna pluck it and you go ahead and just snap and then you suddenly look like you have a hole in your finger? Those things, they're under, you know, a rose thorn, like, I mean, those things are nothing to laugh at.
Well, Dread, you know, this isn't the first time that a dinosaur has been visited by death. I was making an extinction joke.
Yeah, I know. Okay. I was trying to find a way to bring in the Pyroblast Meteor to be able to find a way to go full circle here. You know, it'd probably be a little bit easier if we had Ragnaros, but he, you know, he had his moment in the sunlight, and sadly, Kael'thas is the only one to still hold true.
Glowering turning in a few more gems. Roll20 looking to make the same kind of impression they were able to make on Tomb of the Spider Queen yesterday, which is to get the first turn in, get a lot of siege going, take down a couple of the forts. They got first fort in the bottom, so if Malthael can continue to push that lane, he's already forced Fury to go back. Now granted, he's Dahaka, so he can stalk right back in, but if Malthael can continue to push that, that may be the place where they make their siege once they get the 50 gems turned in.
Look at this rotation collapse up on the mid. She's going to be cycling the wave. Tempo, I mean, they're totally reactionary. Look at Iron Skin being popped outside of a lane. That is absolutely not what you want to see happen here. And, ooh, the hook onto June. Nice peel onto that root. Condemn coming in, but without the follow-up CC there, which is another thing we got to talk about. Post 4, Condemn into the Elun's Grace root is a huge selling point for Tempo Storm's composition. But in the last game, they failed to have that synergy between the front and the back line. If they fail to have that again, it's suddenly no longer a huge selling point. And Johanna struggles at initiating and getting that hardcore team fight that she wants so much into the later stages of the game that I feel like we can't have that miscommunication between June and Cattle.
Absolutely, because when Genji and Li Ming are ready to go, when they feel like it's time to fight, everything has to be right. Another hook lands. June quickly drops down the root on him, hoping that he can get out alive, but it won't be the case this time. Sobs in the back, taking out Kael'thas, making this a 1-for-1 trade.
And Cattle is not out of the woods yet. Buds doesn't have any resources left to get the chase down after that feral lunge. And that was just, in total, just a 1-for-1 trade. Nice fight back for Tempo, though. After losing the Malfurion, typically most people go, oh, we're out the support. We don't have the opportunity to win these fights, but they at least kept it even here in the experience. Roll20 only able to scoop forward about 25% overward. And not too much difference up in the gems either. Really just about 12 separating the two teams.
but the lanes are starting to push up into the towers of Tempo Storm, which means they really do not want to let Roll20 get this first turn in, or there might be a lot that's done to allow Roll20 to get massively ahead in experience, at least enough to get close enough to 10 that they're able to get a second turn in off of it. Roll20 are closer to getting their 7 talents. They already have Energy Royal, so they have that cooldown reduction possibility for Gravity Lapse to follow up after the hooks. Got level 7 now coming in. And again, same build we've had before from Prismaticism's Kael'thas, getting some Fire Enchantment, so not having the burned flesh for the extra damage, even though there are a couple of melee heroes up in the front with Dahaka and Johanna, but still later on he will likely go into those Flame Strike talents.
And what that does do for Prismaticism gives them more immediate single target burst directly after the Stitches hook, right? We just talked about some of the things we desire to see whenever we get those Stitches hooks here in HGC North America. Burst in Lockdown are one of those things, and that talent, you know, I mean, it's no Sun King's Fury, but it'll do.
They're still holding on to whether or not they want to get Touch of Death, maybe Cold Hand for a slow, as a way of making sure that Malthael can't get kited away. There are some ranged heroes on the other side. But you can see, man, how difficult a 1v1 is when you're playing Dahaka into that Malthael, and that's without Touch of Death.
Yeah, you know, and a lot of this comes down to the high Genji rotation I always talk about on some of the smaller maps other than Dragonshire, because the mobility. The Genji really doesn't provide anything other than the immediate teamfight or the ganking capabilities. Nice hook here from Justin. The body blocks are real. Fury already popping his passive. Kata moving down with the rest of the members of Tempo. And now Roll20 is actually split, but they got so much damage on the Fury that Tempo needs to back out of this. They can't deal with this. And Gilly, though not too much has necessarily happened in terms of the kills or structures going down, but Roll20 is a half level ahead this early on. They've drained a lot of the ammo. They're winning in the gem department. If they get this turn in, it's not built like a normal game to get crazy, but it very easily could just open up the gates for Roll20 to flood this game. It would just, the experience could just be out of control.
Especially because they didn't get an immediate turn-in at level 7.
Yeah.
Because Tempo Storm has been delaying them, and they do have good delay tactics, Roll20 have just been able to slowly get ahead, eking a lead here and there, and that lets them get that bigger setup with heroic abilities as a push or as a way for them to make sure that they are able to get their turn-in with heroics. But Goku does get blown up quickly with an orb from Cawthon.
Beautiful setup from June with that range on the roots, but we got to talk about what the downside to that was. The reason I was like, oh, if Goku, if you die, this is a big deal, was mainly with how many gems he had. But the fact that because Tempo kind of gave up, if you will, onto the fight, and then June and Cawthon threw that stuff from such a far range, when he actually went down, it was in Roll20 territory. They could move in to be able to pick up those gems.
Yeah, they got the gems, but it was one less body to help try to make sure that they got the turn in, and now everything that Roll20 had been setting up to do is crumbling because Tempo Storm got the first Web Weavers.
Yeah, but it still leaves a lot left to be done here for Tempo Storm. You know, on a honey to-do list here, I'd say they're about it like the check 1, got turn in, check 2, take down forts, 3, eventually right-clicking the core. We'll get there, but, you know, there's still things to be done. The Web Weavers have descended.
Is the last item on that list Prophet?
Yes. Well, no, you forgot the question marks in between. I probably was a bit too descriptive. Yeah, now that I think about this, you are now our honey to-do list creator. I will, in fact, just be the supervisor. I like to be the dude in the truck is what I'm trying to say.
So wait, you're going to tell me what to put on the list, I'm going to write it? That sounds like no fun at all.
Exactly. I get to get the fun part of the job, you get the lame parts of the job.
I'm going to veto this right away. Just like Roll20 is hoping to veto the Web Weaver phase of Tempo Storm. They're doing all right defending this, thanks to having their lanes pushed back in their favor against Tempo Storm. Moonburn now done, so June can do a little bit more damage now, as well as the fact that it will now apply to mercenaries and monsters. Great for later on when they're defending a Web Weaver phase of Roll20.
But going out for Justin, they sense that the turn-in is a focal point, not only for Tempo, but for Roll20. Again, there's just gems on gems for these teams. Two-man Gravity Lapse connects, helps with the cooldown, synergy there with the level 4, but no kill to be obtained. At least, yeah, Glarong now within a very, very trusting transition through these two lanes. The disengage out. And it is just going to be cycling the minions, getting the gems, and waiting for Tempo to make a mistake. But that might be too little too late. Beautiful cleanse from June, stopping the Gadam, forcing the Blessed Shield. The root Ancestral is there. Buds saving the day and 29 gems.
Yeah, knowing that Blessed Shield had been used there, and in the interim, Justing was finally able to get a turn in. So now Roll20 has a Web Weaver phase to nullify the pressure that Tempo could put on with their own. They're starting with the bottom lane. Like we were talking about earlier, the 1v1 that went so in favor of Malthael has now drained the towers of ammo. So those towers will be a quick pickup, and pushing that wave all the way into the fort so that the Web Weaver shows up right on top of it.
And Gilly, that was another situation where the miscommunication is very much there for Tempo Storm, though. They need to find a way with their hard crowd controls to not find an overlap or stacking them too much. For instance, we saw the Strangling Vines there at level 7. That Ancestral shouldn't have gained full value, but when you're dragged away from the roots, suddenly Ancestral can save that target. That should not have happened. Tempo had the upper hand. Obviously, Bloods played it exactly how he needed to keep the team alive, but with the draft here, Tempo cannot have that level of miscommunication. It is an absolute must if they're going to be successful here against Roll20.
They're giving it another go. They have Psalm now with the Dragon Blade.
Oh,
Twilight
baby.
Dream was perfect from June to get that kill on Kael'thas. And Psalm is not done, bringing down Greymane. Goku's in Tormented Souls like team. Hello, I would love to go back in. But sadly, the hook will have to be used for a helping hand to get Buds out, losing those 2 backline damage dealers.
The positive side here for Roll20 is the fact that at least that team fight happened while there were some Web Weavers still remaining onto the map. And, and because that was onto the map, I'm sorry, I'm too distracted by the Happy Cloud needed hug.
That's an amazing tweet.
Now that I think about it, you're very right. You know, it's like Stitches. What if you get Stitches on an unhappy Cloud mount? What really happens there? Is it just like, I want to play Exception, and it becomes this eternal wormhole?
Yeah, his voice comes out of the mount because it channels his inner
Blizzard, please.
unhappiness.
Oh, Fury able to make it out with the race car there. Convenient use of the level 1 talent. And now we've got a Tempo Storm Web Weaver phase. There are still a absurd amount of gems in the hands of Justing and Buds there on the side of Roll20. The hook comes down, forcing at least a cooldown from Tempo, but they cannot lose those gems. You know, you can lose the heroes, you can't lose the gems, and typically when you lose one, you lose both. So tread lightly here, Roll20, during this Web Weaver phase, or Tempo might find their snowball that they've been looking for.
They might be able to find a win and tie up the series 1-1. They are desperate for it. Nobody wants to be down 2-0 and have to try to make the miracle come back. The reverse sweep puts a lot of pressure on a team, on players. Justing has found somebody to play with. The Roots are behind, hoping to zone away. Glaurung's there with the Cursed Bullet, but Cattle is just fine. Pyroblast starting to come out. Cattle's getting the healing. It will save his life, and the turnaround is severe from Tempo.
The slow fireball moves in, and Roll20 ends up losing Glaurung so fast that Goku, though, just diving with that Tormented Soul, ripping through, and that is now Leeming dead. Somehow Roll20 has made this a 1-for-1, even though they immediately lost Glaurung.
Goku is doing so much work in the backline that Tempo's just trying to disengage, even though Psalm was still doing work. Psalm will take down Kael'thas, which makes it a 2-for-1 again. But this could have been so much worse and may still be a lot worse. Yeah, he's got 29 gems, but Earth Shield is there. Then the heal from Buds, getting Justing back up to a safe amount of health.
All right, so one thing I would really like to see here from Roll20, because these turn-ins have been so very difficult for them to obtain. See how Buds is close enough to the 50 mark on his own? Get it to where he can turn on himself, and then the other two can turn on their own. Hold on a minute here. Justing getting caught out for a smidge. Fury has to go back into the scrub, questioning if he wants to reinitiate. Goku moves up. Blessed Shield's going to be used. Psalm using the Cyber Agility on out, and now Cattle stuck between a rock and a hard place, also known as just Goku and the rest of Roll20.
Roll20 is separating a lot in these fights, but it's working for them. Goku knows exactly how much he can do in the backline, how much pressure he can put on, and staying in the backline while a gorge happens basically just causes chaos. And that's something that we have known Roll20 to like to do, to like to cause before, right? In the way that they play with their Medivh comps. They cause a lot of chaos, and they profit from that chaos. And you could see where it's starting to work for them now. They've been able to get their turn-in phase, finally get rid of some of those gems into the pockets of the Spider Queen. Yeah,
it's like Roll20 kind of thrives under the idea of taking what we know is like, here's the 5 versus 5, right? And then it's like, what if we can break this into a 2v2, a 2v2, and a 1v1? Now, how can we manipulate that to where we win in each one of those, or at least 2/3 of those, and we very much can find ourselves successful into the team fight. So that is something that Roll20's been doing, and Tempo needs to avoid. Heads up dodge there from Fury onto the hook, and the bottom fort now being converted for Roll20 as the Web Weavers are making work. At least 2 forts going to be gained. This third is all that remains.
Roll20 are looking to collapse on top of that fort before the Web Weaver is completely gone. The roots are there. It's about halfway down. Justin's going to get pulled into the depths of Tempo Storm. Gravity Lab's trying to stop. Tempo Storm want to fight this, want to try to push things, want to try to get some kills. But there's still the bottom Web Weaver pushing along.
They're going to boss. Oh, they can't show up on top. And okay, so this is, I was just concerned for Roll20 because, okay, so when you're on the middle part of the game to the later stage of the game, the reason the bottom Web Weaver is such a tricky beast is not only because the conversion patterns and mobility available between mid and bottom lane, but mainly the fact that the boss drops, you just clear the bottom Web Weaver, and that is the farthest distance possible to be able to get that retreat. It's a very risky call to make, but one, the Roll20 toned down, they stepped away. They think that they have too many gems to risk, but because of a couple of picks, Tempo is actually back to even, roughly, when it go looking at those gems.
Yeah, both teams have enough for a turn-in, and Tempo Storm was hoping that they could get the kill. Actually, Cattle went in and got it condemned down, but Fury was stalking in. It just wasn't in enough time to follow up with the drag so that they'd have more time to get the kill on Justing. Justing, meanwhile, happily throwing out some hooks. The waves pushed on top and bottom, really up against Tempo Storm. And Tempo Storm, though, they haven't taken out any of the forts yet for Roll20. So if they can get a Web Weaver phase, they could spike ahead a lot in experience, especially because that top one is so low.
Yeah, that's that, you know, experience in the bank that we were referring to a bit on yesterday's broadcast. And Tempo, they want to make the withdrawal here with these Web Weavers. Top and bottom have not been prepped necessarily ideally, and mid is not going to have necessarily the greatest start out to its life either, having to deal with these Knights. See what Roll20 does on the defensive, but for now, Tempo is still, it's very much their turn to make something happen in this game, otherwise these gems will be wasted.
Goku now has Soul Collector. With the reduction in his Soul Rip cooldown, he's even more sustainable. That and Shroud of Wisdom to try to do what he's been doing in these fights, which is get into the back line. Also has an increased range as well, so he can still make sure that he gets the health off of the heroes, even if they're running away from him. One Web Weaver has been dealt with. Top and bottom still pushing along, about half in their health. But thankfully for Tempo Storm, they are getting those forts down slowly and starting to get that spike in experience we talked about.
Hook dodge there by Psalm. The poke coming out from Cawthon on that Li Ming, along with June, flinging out the spells as much as they can. They move up. They're going to be able to claim it their own, but Prismat's scaring them away along with Justing. Eventually goes down, but you can see Roll20 so desperately trying to feign confidence in their positioning to try and say, hey, Tempo, back away. We do not want to give this up. Looking back at the gems, turn-in available for Roll20. Not the same story for Tempo Storm, but they are not far enough away to where it's unheard of that they would be able to get the next Web Weaver phase. It takes a lot of goaltending, a lot of solid rotations from them, and it's going to start the channel here on top.
Cursed Bullet hits Fury.
Force and cleanse from Bud. Psalm, a lot of pressure onto Prismaticism, getting the Ancestral Healing. Bud has hit so many clutch Ancestral Heals throughout this entire game. They aren't always in the circumstances you want, but they're, wow, the Condemn, the Blessed Shield. The Psalm goes in, getting so many resets here. That is already 2 dead. Gilly, Tempo is just opened up this fight right from the beginning.
Yeah, that was a perfect Dragon Blade from Psalm, and Tempo Storm had a full understanding that with Ancestral Healing being down, having to be used on Kael'thas, that is not a place where Roll20 want to fight at all, and they push them into a corner, the very place where Tempo Storm would love to get value out of the Dragon Blade, and they are rewarded with 2 kills now. Not having to worry about the turn-in even longer for Roll20, especially because that bought the time necessary for them to get their Storm talents at 20.
Yeah, that was exactly what I was about to talk about. It was like, well, you know, he's hit really good ones. They haven't always been in the optimal situation, and Tempo was just looked at it and was like, yeah,
that's
guys.
That's not an optimal situation
yeah,
at all.
We might want to take this fight. They just immediately Twilight Dream, the Dragon Blade from Psalm, and they're making things happen. Talking about making things happen, Fury and Psalm transitioning upward towards this boss. The rest of Tempo coming in for support, but without 20 talent tier advantage, there's no way Roll20 can stop this. Roll20 can't get a counter turn in elsewhere. Nobody is goaltending the stop, so it's essentially a trade for Web Weaver. And in case you're wondering why Justin isn't capping there is he was waiting to see if somebody was there to delay Goku, and then he could hook and actually try and get a kill. They realized the boss was taken. That's why Justin moves out, finally gets the capture point, and now it's going to be just essentially one-for-one trade. Can you stop the boss and then get something out of the Web Weavers post-20, Roll20?
Exactly. It is the last ditch effort to make sure that they're able to not lose the game here, that they can get their 20. They just need to clear out the boss, which they have some range damage dealers to do just that. Goku has Tormented Souls. Hook went down. Tempo Storm getting the keep are fine with disengaging here, not wanting to continue hanging around here for a possibility of a game-changing hook.
All right, so now that the boss has been dealt with, Tempo Storm, what do they have here? About 25 gems, 50 to 60, 50-ish for Roll20, so far closer to the turn-in is going to be Roll20. We now know there is no boss remaining onto the map, and this means Roll20 doesn't have a lead in this game, but they kind of do. You know, they're losing on the structures. Being down a keep is a huge deficit to be looking at, but winning the race to the turn-in, and that's the only objective going to be on the map for a long while, is really nice for them and something you can expect them to be trying to abuse. They know Fury's in the shrub. They don't go for the blind hook. You saw the ping being thrown down, but they didn't have confidence.
Justin now has Hungry Stitches, which changes a lot of how Tempo Storm needs to approach these team fights. It's not just Psalm with his Dragon Blade, who has to watch out for getting picked up with that sort of bolt and gorge that have been melded together into one. Ice Block's been used. Justin would love to be able to eat. Oh, Goku's just gone.
Yeah, because the rest of the members of Roll20 focusing on the butts here. Oh man, everybody going back for the peel. Justin getting a lot of people gorged with that Hungry Hippo, but this is merely trying to save the remainder of his team. Now 20 gems on the ground. Tempo Storm now between the 15 they have in and 55 they've got locked down. They got enough for a Web Weaver phase.
Goku took No One Can Stop Death, so he can come back up. But Tempo Storm still are going to be able to get a turn in, taking advantage of Justin being gone for 45 more seconds. Only 2 keeps remain for Roll20. There's a lot of heroics down for Tempo.
Yeah, a lot. And that's something that Roll20 would like to abuse. But again, without having Justin there, I mean, every team fight, not having a frontliner is very, very scary. And traditionally, we know in this meta where we have that secondary offlaner, they can be that bully on things like the Oryx or the Dahakas. It's a Malthael. He is not the man who can be the frontline. Yes, he can draw some attention, but it is merely temporarily. Web Weavers now find their way up to the mid-keep. This is going to be going down without the Justin there. It's just how much more falls on the side of Roll20.
And Tempo chose, even though Stitches was down, to push along with the mid Web Weaver to get that keep. Again, Dragon Blade and Twilight Dream being down is nothing to mess with. They get the keep. Roll20 need to take out the Web Weaver that's now on their core. Bottom is still pushing. Tempo Storm are hoping that they could force down the final keep of Roll20. So Roll20 have no structures between them and their core.
Nothing. So onto the top Web Weaver. There we go. Now we're going to see Yoda. Or excuse me, not Yoda. This is not Roll20 old in phase 1. This is in fact Goku.
I do that too.
It's a little bit difficult, you know, when they aren't on the screen and you're like, oh, Malthael, yeah, that's a Yoda. Okay, here we go. But no, Goku transitioning down was unable to be able to get the force. 1 keep difference after that Web Weaver phase. Our boss has got, momentito, about a minute until it's up. It's still an edge to Roll20 because they can force that turn-in, but the last time I said that, they got picks, they ended up losing 20 gems, and Tempo found enough to be able to get the turn-in for themselves, so it's only a slight one again. And now 2 keeps, that's enough pressure that maybe you'd even give it to Tempo. They can kind of play the map to lay things out enough.
Yeah, and while Roll20 would like to be looking for where they can get some hooks, because there's catapult pressure now, a lot of times Roll20 won't be together, and there's no Dahaka like Tempo Storm has with Fury to be able to stalk in if somebody is found. Roll20 have to plan things out, plan their ganks out.
Roll20 also, at least on how they cleared that wave and looking at the wave, I saw one other wave where they were doing this too, is that because they're so focused on clearing out the wave, they aren't worried about where the gems drop. And I know that's not something I talk about a lot, but we're at the point of the game where you can't mess around with these type of things. We need anything and everything to make sure you don't lose the game. We lost 3 gems up on mid because it's how you clear it and where you know the backline ranged ones, because those are the ones that possess the gems.
They're focusing a lot on top. They understand that with the boss up right now, Tempo Storm can potentially bait up there. They want to make sure that the wave is pushed up here. Tempo Storm, though, is there. They're responding. They're all moving up. And meanwhile, again, they have the global possibilities. So they have Dahaka pushing along with the Giants toward the final keep of Roll20. Roll20 have to start this boss and hope that they can win off of this because they are running out of options.
Cattle moves up. He found himself adjusting. The pulverize down. The boss already below 50% HP. Here comes Fury onto the backside. Prismat throwing the gravity laps over the wall. Saw him dashing in, getting the pressure there. Look at Fury. So much pressure onto the front side, but Buds ended up going down to the auto attack there of the boss. 2 members of Roll20 already dead. Justin doing his best with the Gorge. He gets the boss and actually saves the boss for Roll20, but they aren't going to win the fight.
No, and probably not the game either. At the rate they are losing their heroes. Everybody down except Glaurung as he runs away. Tempo Storm will walk straight toward the core of Roll20 to tie up the series. Goku once again used No One Can Stop Death. He's going to do his best to stop things along with Glaurung, but no Stitches, no Rhaegar, and no Prismaticism. The positioning of Prisma off to the side saw him so easily, found him, and then yes, he shot off his Pyroblast, but it just was not enough. Tempo Storm gets onto the core now. June's gonna get thrown away, but Tempo Storm takes it out in our 25-minute tomb game.
Tempo Storm fighting there in that last game, winning. I mean, it really was just like very early on, you could see the preparation and the advantage that the wave clear had provided to the draft for Roll20.
Yeah.
And then they just got one really good pick, absolutely necessary for them to stall it out. And at all moments where you're like, they need this because of the compositional kind of flaws that they drafted according to the map, they made up for it every single time. And to the point where they even got such a big upper hand that they were able to abuse that Dahaka split push, the force boss on Roll20. It looked ugly, but it was the smartest decision Roll20 could have made. And in the end, Tempo, they thrived.
It's crazy how important that one pick was for them to get the first turn-in phase, and then later on, because all of the forts were pretty low, taking them all out at once to give them the edge to go toward 20. From there, Tempo Storm had the control, and Roll20 had to make those kinds of risky plays, like the boss call. In the end, Tempo Storm ties things up. We're going to head to a short commercial break, and when we come back, we'll have game number 3. Stick with us. Hope that they can win off of this because they are running out of options.
Cattle moves up. He found himself adjusting. The pulverize down. The boss already below 50% HP. Here comes Fury onto the backside. Prismat throwing the gravity laps over the wall. Saw him dashing in, getting the pressure there. Look at Fury. So much pressure onto the front side, but Buds ended up going down to the auto attack there of the boss. 2 members of Roll20 already dead. Justin doing his best with the Gorge. He gets the boss and actually saves the boss for Roll20, but they aren't going to win the fight.
No, and probably not the game either. At the rate they are losing their heroes. Everybody down except Glaurung as he runs away. Tempo Storm will walk